Hey now, and welcome to episode 61 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here all along, welcome back. But if this is your first time listening to us, well then welcome. I'm your host, Ruben, and as always, my co-host Stan is on the line. How you doing tonight, man?
Doing great, buddy.
Awesome. So, this is an episode with Nick, who reached out, a friend of a friend that reached out to be on the podcast, and I talked to him a couple days before recording this, and instantly knew it would be a good conversation. And we kind of go all over the place, but I apologize. This was another episode where we really didn't leave any room for you to butt in. But how'd you think the conversation went?
Oh, it's all good, man. Yeah, no, I thought it was great. Like, you guys pretty seamlessly flowed in between topics, and I was just along for the ride. Like, I didn't have the depth of knowledge on some of the topics you guys were speaking about, so I wasn't able to, if I was able to add something, I would have added it. It was perfect how it was.
Yeah. So, Nick is definitely a young man that can speak on a high level about a lot of different topics, and I like the way he thinks, and I hope you guys do too. So here is Nick. Hey, cool, Nick. Thanks for reaching out and coming on the podcast. We talked the other day and we had a really good chat. So, I'm really looking forward to talking to you here, man.
Yeah, honestly, thanks for the opportunity. I'm super stoked about this. Shout out to Adam Clay Steber for the connection. That's super sweet. And something I never really imagined doing, but I think just based off just the profundity, at least the personal level of the experience, I'm super just grateful to be able to have the opportunity to talk to you guys. So thank you for the opportunity more than anything.
Yeah, man. So what we talked about was your experience with San Pedro recently, but why don't you give us a little background into, kind of your psychedelic experiences leading up to this experience?
It's a good question. So I got into it. I was a pretty kind of like, I don't want to say misguided is the right word, but a very unfocused kid. And I got into LSD when I was about, I think either late 17 or right when I turned, late 17. And that was just a game changer, man. And luckily enough, I was able to come across the book Be Here Now by Ram Dass towards the beginning of those experiences. And that gave it a lot of context. So just kind of blessed for that, because I feel like I would have just been kind of like aimlessly and mindlessly going place to place until like I've stumbled across something like that or someone to be able to kind of illuminate that path more than anything. And so I've done a decent amount of psychedelics. I like acid probably the most. Shrooms are pretty cool. I'm a big fan of DMT too. Did Molly once. But I think out of all of them, and I've only done it once, San Pedro I think was like the best overall experience. It kind of feels like LSD without that really metallic edge, and like shrooms without like the tiredness, and it's like a fine kind of pretty good balance between those two. But I definitely say the psychedelic path has opened me up to a lot of different like spirituality, and it's allowed me to like re-acknowledge my faith and like my belief in Christ too. Even though it started with Buddhism, I would still say Buddhism is a very heavy influence too. But it's just kind of opened up so many doors that like I never really knew existed, and I think that's what happens when like you open your mind. You like get introduced to these new experiences that the universe wants to show you. It's just you need to kind of take that first step. So I definitely say that psychedelics have been some of the most profound things I've ever done, but also some of the most important things to like create me into the person I am today.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's very true. I like that you bring spirituality into it so much, and God and everything. Cause, that's one thing I've always thought is just like, whether or not someone relates to Buddhism or Christianity or anything like that after having a psychedelic experience, I from the experiences I've had, I can't see believing in nothing and not believing in spirit after, having these experiences,
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing too, is just like being aware of your spirit, that we're like a spirit with a body, and like that everyone else has it too, and we're all connected by that same principle too. And like once we can kind of start seeing the background instead of the form, and just really understanding like who we are as a people, I think that would just change our perspective on a lot of different things. It'd probably be a lot less conflict. I mean, obviously we're humans and like we're meant to butt heads, but at the same time, I think once you kind of feel your own vulnerability and understand someone else's, you're less likely to do something very like physically drastic. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think like that's when we talk about the psychedelic revolution that needs to happen, and they've been talking about it since the 60s. I think that's what you're talking about. It's like, letting love and spirit win, and not, hatred and materialism,
right. Do you guys think they'll, well, because obviously the 60s was a huge revolution. Do you think we'll have another one coming up here? Do you think we'll ever have something like that again?
I think it's just ongoing. I think it's just like I don't think it's going to be something that's categorized as a revolution. I think it's just going to be ongoing progression as we're seeing currently. Like, I think we're at the point now where we've crossed the bridge that psychedelics mean bad, like we're seeing the positive results come out of it. And I think the people that used to deny that there was any positive effects that came out of it are starting to become keen on the effects that they have on like PTSD and everything that the majority of people can agree is a problem that we need to cover, and like once we figure out how to best manipulate these medicines to produce positive results in like treatment resistant depression and even minor depression for people that just everyday people, like I think that's when like the major switch will happen and people will start using it even more than is being used now, and more than just like an underground substance, which it still kind of is,
Yeah. Yeah. I think like maybe the term psychedelic revolution is too drastic. I think it's more the psychedelic tipping point is what we're coming up to, to where like in the 60s, is very much a vibe of like, the psychedelic revolution was like taking it to the streets, forcing people to freak out kind of thing, and like, I don't think that's the way. I think it's the psychedelic revolution is a transition of just to a period of awakening as we enter the information age and we exit the industrial age. I think that's the thing, is that there'll just come a time where like people, like most people are psychedelic, or at least done it once, or at least see its benefits. And that's, the psychedelic tipping point is what that would be. And we're coming up on it, man. And definitely, everything we're going through now is like speeding that up,
Right. I like that idea of the tipping point, because it's like there's only a certain point, and I feel like there's probably some sort of like physics principle behind this, but I don't really know. I don't know enough physics to be able to describe it. But there's got to be a certain point where like when there's like enough people are like awakened, where something very just like drastic happens, where like all of a sudden, like you said, that tipping point occurs and we start seeing massive change in our society. Hopefully, I mean, ideally, I think it would be for the better. But obviously, when you do these experiences, you open yourself up to a lot of different things too. And I think that's why it's so important to like really focus on like the positive parts of it, and just being able to connect to something bigger than yourself, whatever that may be, like whatever it's a religion or spirit or whatever it may be, and just, just basing it off of goodness and love. That's all you can really do,
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, tell us about the San Pedro experience. What brought that on and how'd it go?
Quite the rabbit hole. So San Pedro is something I've wanted to do for a super long time. Like I said, I described all the things I've done before, like most people have, but I feel like San Pedro is definitely one of those more obscure ones, and that it's also a lot more difficult to get your hands on, at least where I'm located in Wisconsin. And like, it's difficult to get your hands on anything out here, honestly. It's quite the state. But I've been kind of looking for it for a while, and I'm kind of keeping my eye on it, and finally managed to somehow appear to my house, kind of thing. And I don't know. I was just really, when I was younger, I felt like I really didn't respect the drugs or these, I don't even know if we want to call them drugs just because of the stigma, but I didn't respect these substances enough, like what they would call it, mushroom spirit, whatever it may be. And that's one thing I really wanted to do with this. So I have a little meditation prayer altar that's normally up in my closet upstairs, but now it's down here. And I basically put the mescaline on it, like right in front of my like Jesus cross. And I just like said a prayer and I was like, God, whenever you are ready for me to do this, let me know. And just kind of waited. And it was probably like a month and a half. I was really surprised too. And all of a sudden that itch it just came, like inevitably just the spirit starts coming to you and you're like, okay, awesome. So at that point, I basically kind of got to a decision of how I wanted to handle the experience. Recently, I've been doing some intermittent fasting for basically like workout purposes more than anything. And my buddy Adam recently had an experience that he's probably gonna be on here and talking about, but he did he did some sort of fast. I'll let him reveal what he did. So that definitely inspired me a lot. So I wanted to do, which I'd done one a few years ago, but not as like spiritually intense, but a 3-day water fast. That was kind of like, I tried to like gear up to a little bit with all the intermittent fasting I did. So it wasn't such like a shock to your body. So that definitely helped a lot. So that was that. And I kind of did some other things where I just cut out social media basically for just basically winded it down to like an hour a day before and then did like none for like 3 days. I hadn't been drinking for a while just for workout purposes, and I didn't smoke weed or anything for like 2 weeks, which is very abnormal for me. So just kind of just more or less was a layer of kind of like how I was really trying to like I said, respect it more than anything. So I feel like the more you can respect these experiences, maybe it's not always positive in the certain moment, but you'll gain the most out of them. I think you'll learn the most of the things that you need to learn. So at that point, I was kind of like gearing up and everything, did that, starting the social media fast. And a couple days before, I'd realized, maybe like 5 days before, I realized I didn't have an intention. I was like, whoa. And I was kind of thinking about this. And Ruben and you and I, when we had our previous conversation, talked a little bit about Jordan Peterson. There's one talk that he's having where he's talking, the student asked him a question. And he said, or he goes, I don't know if it was really layered as a question, but it was more or less an experience. And he's talking about how he's on DMT and he smoked his DMT. And all of a sudden that these entities in this realm told him that Jordan Peterson was coming to awaken the divine masculine. And for those that are in spiritual circles, obviously the divine masculine is not really talked about too much. Obviously due to many, many, many years of mistreatment of women, we've really focused on the feminine in our society, which is good. We need to uplift women. There's no doubt about that. We need equality. We need people to have an equal say. And we need people to be involved in our society if they want to be involved in whatever they want to be involved in, But at the same time, I think as men, we've kind of, and I take this like as a personal responsibility too, it's all on us. We've kind of like lost our way, I think, a little bit. Like, I feel like at least maybe it's just me being in college and being able to look around certain guys and stuff like that. And it kind of feels like men are a little misguided. And I don't know, you listen to Jordan Peterson talks and stuff, and like a majority of his listeners are men. I feel like going through the process in the past of basically, you work, you provide for your wife and your family, this and that, but that our roles have changed now and we're kind of like left without like a little vision, I guess, more than anything. And I think that's why Jordan Peterson's so popular, is because he kind of inspires men to create their own. And I think that's a purely individual process. So I set my intention for that. I was texting my buddy M, and I had said, my intention for this trip is to awaken and heal the divine masculine within myself so that I can inspire others to awaken. And I was like typing that out to him through text, and I just got like chills, and I was like, okay, cool. That's awesome. And so that was that. I went through the fast and it was kind of like a leading up thing. Like I didn't really plan on doing all this stuff, but like all of a sudden just like a intuitive creativity kind of kicked in. And the first night I did this thing, a really good, another psychedelic adventure of mine sent me a recipe for something called a green collective. And basically it was a cacao ceremony where you have cacao, but then you have this thing called this green collective, which is a mix of like a high amount of CBD, a mushroom microdose, kratom, and dried marijuana leaves, I couldn't believe that he was able to get his hands on them. Let's put it that way. But he managed to pull through and get those for me. And I had that experience and like started saying some prayers. And this is where I said that kind of like almost like a magical creativity kicked in, where I have some other ritual gear around my house, and I was reading some stories about people who did more of what you consider magical experiences. I'm not really big on magic, but I think like the type of prayer that I do could be considered magic. So you could probably like align that under the idea of like white magic kind of stuff, right hand path kind of thing. That's just what I feel comfortable messing around with, and I feel like it's giving me the best experiences. I definitely messed around with something like a year ago that kind of brought in some kind of funky stuff. So it's something I don't really mess around with. But the one thing I advised was making sure that you're wrapped up in a circle, not wrapped, but like there's a circle around you. Apparently that keeps out spirits that you do not invite in. So I was like, grab this other ritual gear that I had that happened to be a circle, and then surrounded it in flowers. It was like 8 or 10 of them or something like that in a circle formation. That kind of just gave me a little bit more peace while I was doing a lot of this stuff. So I was like doing that, and I was praying and meditating, and I had like this, just all of a sudden there's like this massive wave of like gratitude like overfilled me, and like I just kept, all of a sudden I just started praying for like everybody that I knew, like to like a really like fine details, like every single like super close buddy that I have, like any girl that I've ever had a relationship with, whether like positive or negative, like all my friends and my family, and like really like dove deep into these, and like any sort of like negativity that I had associated with it, like I just prayed for them, and like prayed for myself to be able to forgive them. And it was just a very powerful experience. And I decided to sleep in that circle for those next 3 nights for that 3-day fast leading up to it. So I slept in there on the floor with a pillow. I don't know why, but it just felt right. But the next day was pretty rough. I didn't feel too good with the fast and everything, just very low energy, very lethargic. Just kind of felt like I was just kind of like a floating head more than anything. Just tried keeping up with my praying and stuff. And I did like a part of like the fast, and the reverse part was building up like how much I was meditating, to a point where I was getting up on the last 2 day, or the last day of the fast was like an hour a day. So I like, basically I was like meditating for, I was supposed to be meditating for like an hour a day, or 2 hours that day. So I was meditating for like an hour, and like even that like really didn't help. So that was kind of tough, but I ended up talking to this chick that I'm talking to that night, and that kind of helped to just like keep my mind off like the hunger, not even like the hunger, but it just felt tired more than anything. So that happened. And then the next day I theorized, either it was God's work, or I theorized I went through into like what you call ketosis in the fasting state. Which I can't scientifically explain well enough, but it's like, that's the whole idea of like the keto diet. Like you don't eat a lot of carbs. Because I moved to a liquid diet a few days before. So like I wasn't eating a lot of carbs at all. So I was like kind of revved up that day. It was pretty cool to feel good again. And I decided I was going to do acid that day. So I did that, and just kind of read some more like spiritual material, like Bhagavad Gita, Be Here Now a little bit. And then for some reason I wanted to do DMT at the peak, and I was like, I was just, I don't know, like I said, a lot of it was just like a bunch of creativity, and I've done it a couple times, but like it just was more intuitional. So I did some yoga before that, and then let's see here, I'm trying to look at my bullet points so I can try and remember everything. But so I did that, and kind of like said some prayers before. Let me see if I can find it. Are you guys aware of the book Meditations by Marcus Aurelius?
Yeah.
It was big on like Stoic philosophy, and I've read it a couple times. And so I like had some like highlighted annotations in there, and I was like kind of just like randomly opened up to the page right before. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the picture here because I can't quite remember the last time that I had read it, and like I can't remember exactly what page it was. Oh my gosh, I've taken far too many pictures since this experience. What am I doing? And here it is. Right before this DMT trip, like the one, I was like, I'm going to read to this passage where this annotation is. And it's like, whatever may happen to you, it was prepared for you all eternity. And the implication of causes was from eternity spitting the thread of your being, to which it's incident for it. And like, I'd never had such like a peaceful thing like said to me, or like read to me, or me reading or thinking like in my entire life before a DMT trip. And I was like, that's awesome. So I was like, I said, like, pray up to God for that. And like a bunch of just like weird coincidental things, the idea of synchronicity, you know, started kind of kicking in those days. And like I just never felt like I was supposed to do something so much in my life. Like it's all I can really describe it as. So I then smoked this DMT, and well, actually before that, I was like, I called upon the idea of the divine feminine to come and help heal the divine masculine, because I believe women are far better at nurturing. So I was like, I don't know, I can't fully do this myself. So like, let's hope she's like friendly, you know? And so I did that, and I honestly like felt that presence while I was on DMT. And normally I'm like, and my buddy Adam can talk about this too. Normally I'm very like involved in the experience, where I'm kind of like trying to think a lot during this experience, like DMT specifically, and just trying to work with it. And like it feels like clay sometimes, and I try and like throw out questions and try and like understand what's coming back. But I got to a point where I just kind of felt a lot of respect for the idea of the divine feminine, and I don't want awakening of the divine masculine to be like to put down women again. Like I want it to be something that like we can work collaboratively as like different sexes to be able to like provide the best outcome that we can, you know? So like at that point, my idea was like I submitted out of respect to this experience and to this spirit, and just let it happen. And it was like one of the most like peaceful things I think I've ever experienced in my life. And like I came out of it like literally just like literally just like giggling, just like laughing so much, and like I was just thanking God for like this experience, and like couldn't stop like just smiling, just this fat smile on my face. And I'm sitting there just like saying affirmations to myself, and all of a sudden like my friends roll up just super randomly, like picking up something that they'd left at my house. And so I like invited them on in, and then they stayed and hung out like for the rest of the night, which was like probably pretty good, because I think that probably grounded me a lot. And I'm not saying I would have had like a bad experience, but it probably helped to just like evade any sort of like internal thoughts that would have gone funky, you know? But then one of my friends, he stayed later, and we were talking, and I was kind of just trying to relay to him the experience and everything that was happening. He was kind of talking about the idea of like demons, and like he's like, oh, in these places I used to like see and experience like dark forces like in the room with me. And I was like, and I'm a firm believer that our outer world is mainly just a reflection of our inner world. So at that point, I'm primed to ask, which I feel a little, I don't know if it was like the right question to ask at that point, but I didn't think the future events would lead to where they did. But I was like, or do you think these forces are something that are outside of you or inside of you? And then like we kind of just like casually talked for the rest of the night, and nothing really came of it at that point. But the next day, I was kind of prepping basically this meal, because my inspiration for the San Pedro experience, I was normally going to do it Sunday, but I was trying to respect the native culture who like kind of runs these experiences, who are kind of like the connectors to it. So normally they do it on Saturday nights, like Saturday literally at dusk till Sunday at dawn. Then they have a church service, and then they signify the end. So I tried to replicate this experience as much as possible. And they have so like this thing called the 7 Sacramental Breakfast that you eat literally right at dawn. So that was at 5:32 a.m., I believe. So I was prepping some pork like on my third day of being fasted, just like hungrier than shit. Like, but at the same time, I was like, I know I'm breaking my fast in like 6 hours, so I'm okay. And then M texted me saying that he wanted a trip, but like he said he got back to his room, realized he lost his tabs and couldn't find them, accepted that, and then he found them. And he said that was the universe rewarding him for coming to peace, and that like the experience wasn't supposed to happen. So I was like, okay, cool. That's not something that I have to really keep my mind on or anything. Like, that's awesome. Just one less thing to worry about in preparation for this. So yeah, I'm prepping the meal and everything. I'm finishing reading some, like, I'm really big into like Tibetan Buddhism, like the Shambhala lineage specifically. So I was reading one of those books, and that was kind of just like getting me through the day more than anything too. And then I kind of like basically went off the grid, other than like do not disturb mode. Basically everyone kind of knew what I was doing for the most part. So like no one was really, it was only for emergencies. So at that point, I'm prepping stuff, and then I start prepping the masculine, which I did a tea. So I basically boiled it for, I want to say, was it an hour? I think it was an hour, filtered it, and then at that point, boiled that down again. And with the stuff that I'd filtered, it's like a goop. And like no one really usually says you have to eat it, but like I really wanted to make sure I tripped, because like I don't want to go through this whole experience and like have it be a dud. That would be such a bummer. Yeah. So I made the tea, and then I put the goop, you could call it, in yogurt. So, and I didn't eat it till after my fast, so that worked out well. So I broke the fast with like a very simple meal. It was probably a little heavier than I needed, because I put some like bread and like peanut butter and stuff in there, but I didn't really care. I was like, whatever, I'm hungry. So I had that. And then basically everything's prepped up. I have the altar ready, like the circle's still around and everything. And I'm diving on in. I have like my last hour of meditation, and say my prayers. And all of a sudden I start drinking it. And I don't know, it's very interesting consuming it, because like I've only read these stories, and like obviously your first time doing a psychedelic experience, no matter what substance it is always a very new experience. I was very curious to see like if it was as bad as people said, because everyone says you purge, and like I've never really purged on mushrooms or anything, and I didn't end up purging from it. Did it taste good? No. Was it bearable? I think so. I put some lemon in there, and that helped out a lot. So if anyone ever is doing it, I advise doing. So then at that point, I got some like Native American chanting music on in the background. I rolled up some cigars or some hand rolled cigarettes, because that's what they do during these experiences as well. Like I said, I was trying to replicate as much as I could to try and respect the experience, so I feel like you can get the best way out of that. And also I'm like an hour in, and I haven't. Mescaline was a pretty long come up. It wasn't until like an hour and a half where it really started like feeling it. But all of a sudden I get a call from my buddy, and he's like, "Have you heard what happened to M?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "Well, he had a bad trip." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, dude. Like he like basically like attacked our roommate. Like his eyes were like completely black. Like something like happened." I was like I'm all I could think of, and I'm obviously I'm tripping, but at the same time like demonic force kind of thing, like, you know. And just based off what our conversation was the previous night, whatever he was talking about, I felt like that's what came to the surface basically. And apparently like kind of like it wasn't really I wouldn't classify as like attacking a roommate, but like from the sounds of it, hearing from his experience, he felt very uncomfortable being with one of his roommates. He was trying to get out, the roommate was trying to keep him in. Tensions start rising, so he runs out, and I guess like they ended up calling the cops because like he kind of attacked him a little bit just to get him off him more than anything. And they called the cops. He got arrested, and while he's tripping dick, having like the worst experience of his life, he's sitting in this white room by himself, like during a bad trip. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, oh my God, this sounds so horrifying. So I'm not in the state to handle this by any means. I know in like 2 hours, if I'm like in a police station in 2 hours, it's not going to be a good time. So I called some of my closest buddies at that point who are good friends with M2. Praise be to them because they helped out a lot. They kind of like went to the after scene, kind of got more stuff figured out. We figured out like what his bail was and everything. We found out his parents were picking him up, so that was like pretty clutch. And at that point, he was able to get out at a moderately reasonable time and not have to sit there literally all night. So at that point, I like am kind of at a decision point after talking to these guys where I'm kind of like some fear came up. And this is the only thing like I felt responsible for it in a sense, because I felt like what I was doing was, and this is nothing against like me, this I feel like a lot of this is really just like inspiration from up above. Like I don't really identify with a lot of this, like in terms of like but like I feel like what I like the ceremony itself was very spiritually powerful to a point where it kind of like shines like a lot of light on people, and like I think it kind of brings some of your darknesses to the surface. So and that's just kind of what I believe, like just experiences with people just in general in certain areas, and like I kind of just like felt responsible a bit, and I was like, oh shit, like did this ceremony do that? I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like all of a sudden, like I had a moment. It was like a make or break moment, and I was like, oh shit. And I had a decision, like, do I want to continue doing this, or do I stop? And I'm just thinking to myself, and the list literally went through my head. I'm like, if I were to do this, I don't think I'd be able to look myself in the. If I stopped doing this, I don't think I'd be able to look myself in the mirror. Like I'd want to like literally kill myself. Like there'd be no, like how can you be like guided to do something for so long and put all this work into it and then just back off? And the one thing that I've realized recently, especially about fear, is the only way out is through. The more you try and push it away, the more it's going to consume you. And like you have to like dive into that. Like in terms of like Jungian psychology talks about, like there's the way to enlightenment isn't like casting visions of like holy light figures. It's diving into your darkness and shining a light on that. And like that's they refer to as the process of integration, and being able to like dive into these fears. I think it's kind of like a video game almost, where like every time you defeat a boss, like you get their power up. And I think that's the same way with the fear. Is like once you can overcome that fear, you gain some sort of personal power, and whether that's through way of like bless you, whatever that's through, like, but it's like courage or just like strength, stamina, whatever it may be. The game keeps changing, you know. So I decided I was going through it. But at the same time, I felt like, what am I going to do now? Like, I was waiting for something to come to me. I didn't really have a plan for it other than like sitting in this circle for like 8 hours. So I was like, all right. And like I said, it started at literally at dusk. I can't remember. It was like 8:20 or maybe 8:40. I can't remember. Somewhere around there. And so I continued, and like, I'm like, I need to help him somehow. So all of a sudden, like I told these, the only thing I could think that this comes from, I don't really know. And if anyone has an idea, I would love to hear about it. But I just kind of started doing this form of like prayer that evolved into like visualization prayer, where I felt like I and because I was like meditating at this point. So like I don't know if you guys have like ever meditated on psychedelics, but like you kind of just, it feels like you leave your body almost. It's pretty powerful. I advise being very careful with it because like you can dive into some pretty deep stuff. But I think it's also very profound, and if you respect it, I think it'll respect you. And being able, like, all of a sudden, like I started doing that, and like I started like visualizing myself in my buddy M's body, and like beginning to like cast light on the darkness inside of him. And like I called upon God, and like I felt like obviously I'm tripping, but like this is what I like I believe that something happened here. I'll explain why later. But, like I literally saw like God and Christ like literally like performing like spiritual warfare on the darkness inside this man's soul. And I felt like that was the only thing I could do. And my family, especially my mom's side, is very spiritual, very prayer oriented, where they'll send out like we've we've prayed over meals at McDonald's with my face is extremely red in embarrassment at the age of like 8, like kind of thing. And they'll like these some like prayer requests and stuff, like pray for so and so, kind of thing. I think prayer is a very powerful form of like energy where like you're thinking about this and you're essentially sending out super powerful positive vibes. How that manifests itself, I don't know. It's not always like the way you want it to, but I think it's like the way it needs to. And all of a sudden, like I started like asking the people that were closest to me to pray for this man, just to pray to be able to like have God's light touch him, to be able to have his soul be awakened in light. There's stuff like that. And like I was reaching out to this girl I was talking to, like my mom. I like texted my dad. This is one of my favorite parts. Is all of a sudden like I was explaining it because my mom's like, "Oh, what happened?" Blah blah blah. And like I just kind of briefly explained it to her, and she's like, "Well, like, are you on something right now?" I'm like, yeah." And like, she's known about this stuff for a really long time. So also like, mom mode kicks in. She FaceTimes me. Like, I got to turn down the chanting music in the background, like some lights in the room. And like, she's talking to me, and she's like, you can sense the worry, because like she's never really been introduced to psychedelics or anything like that. So I like to think I'd use them relatively smart, and like I said, with the whole respect aspect. So I'm trying to tell them, like, just remember, I'm okay, and like she starts praying for me over FaceTime, starts praying for over FaceTime. Or, cut that out, please. And so like I calmed her down and everything, got back to it, and I reached out to a lot of our collective friends in a giant group chat we had saying like pray for this man, which is not something that I would normally do. This is like I consider myself very spiritual, very I don't want to say religious because I think religion tends to identify with institutions a lot of the times, and I think institutions don't always capture the ideas that Christ or Buddha or these Hindu gods are trying to explain the best by any means. I think once you start getting a lot of massive people involved in money, things degrade a bit. But basically, I was just reaching out to these people, and like I said, it wasn't something I did, and so I continued going through that, and then all of a sudden, like I said with before, is like there was these breakfasts that I had to do, and I ended up M's mom contacted me through Facebook and we found out that like he was picked up and everything, so that was like a good feeling. Could know that he's like in good hands at that point. Like I said, I just felt like I was in his body. It was kind of like the main portion of that. And at that point, we continue into like making these breakfasts. And I prepped some food. We had to make 6 things technically because one of them was water. But I had to like make these cookies basically, like tripping balls at like 4 a.m. in my like kitchen. So I'm like scattering all around. I got like this I'm a big fan of like the new Kanye West gospel music. So I got that like blaring in the background. I have blessed playlist of all like my favorite spiritual music. I'm playing like prepping all this food. And all of a sudden the time's running down. I gotta be ready at 5:32 a.m. If I don't have it ready, like I feel like I'm disavowing the ceremony in a sense because that was gone. Ended up literally bringing out at 5:31. Said the prayer at 5:32. I did take a picture because I thought it was beautiful. So I did that, and then at that point I consumed the food, and it was just like it felt magical, honestly. And I texted the friends that had helped me out with M earlier, and I said we're going to knock that out again. We're going to M's tomorrow, and I really want to pray over this man. It's not something I would normally ever do in my life, but this is something that just I felt a calling really. And So I invited them to breakfast as well because there's a second breakfast. So I'm cleaning up all the stuff in the kitchen, making them like eggs and something. I can't remember what it was. If anyone's interested, I'm sure we can get connected. I can share where I got all this stuff from. But you can also go down to like Oklahoma and they can do it for you. So like that would probably be a lot more convenient. But I'm kind of a broke ass, so that wasn't really on the realm of possibility at that point. But no, I make that second breakfast. They come over, and like these two are basically like atheists, and I have them watching this church service and stuff, and they were like praying for this man that night. So it's just like this felt really wild, man. And like we drive to his house, which is like 2 hours away. And we start talking to him, kind of grounded him down a little bit, and basically we were talking to him, and I'm like, I had mentioned him. I'm like, do you mind if I pray over? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, do you want people here? No. And he's like, not really, no. So like they kind of walked away, and there's just him and I, and like also we just like hugged and embraced each other, and was just trying to send him as much positive vibes as I could, because I can't imagine how I've had a bad trip at a point in a dark room where I felt like I was being eaten by crows, and I can't imagine what he experienced in that night, being surrounded in a white room after being arrested and like being basically like having to run out of your house and like having like your inner darkness come up out of your control completely. I can't imagine how horrifying that'd be. So I'm just trying to empathize with them as much as possible, because that's got to be, and we still talk about it to this day, like that's a powerful experience. And we were talking, and I kind of told him a little bit about like what I did that night, and it was really wild. He goes, he's like, that's weird. He's like, when I was in that, like, I think he said, I don't know if he said when he's in the cell or like when he, I think he said when he's in his cell, he's like, I felt your presence. And I was like, what? I was like that's what I was trying to do, obviously, but like it just felt, to have that confirmation was almost otherworldly. So we continue going. Like I said some prayers over him. That I did like a 5-gram mushroom trip in the dark last year, where I found like when you're in the dark, you see a lot, and I found some demons that were inside. So all of a sudden, like I instantly Googled like a bunch of like banishing demon prayers, basically like exorcism prayers, and like said them over myself. And honestly, ever since then, life's been just crazy good, and just like felt very spiritually connected. And I said a lot of those same prayers over him too, because I felt it's the only thing I could really do. You know, like I prayed that God would help me be able to try and like help this man, to try and get his healing, to help him. And I felt it was all I could do, and just did that, embraced again, and then we had left. And basically, like the ceremony's all done and everything. And in terms of we've been in a lot of contact recently, and he's just been telling me, he literally says, he's like, I just can't believe the amazing things that God is doing in my life. Like, it's amazing, because I think sometimes we need to have everything fall apart in order for us to start building. And like psychedelics offer a really fast avenue for that sometimes, and sometimes it can be very painful, but I believe that there is meaning in the pain, no matter what that pain may be. It's meant there to get us to go somewhere else, somewhere higher than, not exactly higher, but maybe deeper in ourselves, of where just higher levels of joy, higher levels of peace. And I think that through that pain, there's a lot of meaning. And ever since that experience, I've just had a lot of synchronicity. Just, I've never felt so in tune with cosmos, is all I can really put it as. Like everything from like numbers to this girl that I'm seeing, there's a lot with her. There's like a lot with just like, I'll think something, and then like literally like the world will reflect that. And like I was like walking by, and you can call it I believe coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And I'm walking by this church, walking home. I was pretty big too, from a bonfire a few nights ago. And all of a sudden I'm walking by this church, and I think, as I'm thinking in my head, God's light, literally as I thought light, like the motion sensor on this light went off. Like you can take that as a coincidence, but like just such divine timing, I can't deny anymore. And that's really what I've learned from this experience. The most part is that I have my spiritual life is, I love it. It's incredible. It's done so many different things to me, from a point where I was 16 and I felt so backed into a corner by hiding from the idea of God and being just like this kind of intellectual asshole about it a little bit, to a point where I literally got down on my knees in front of a church and I cried my eyes out for just like what I felt was like a half hour to an hour. And I was like, I can't do this by myself. I don't know what to do. I've driven myself so deep into a hole, and I don't know what to do. And I finally feel like I've gotten out of that hole just in the past few years. Just really incredible and amazing things have happened since then. And I think God brought psychedelics into my life to be able to illuminate that path. And that is something that I will die on a rock on. That's something that I tell my mom frequently. She asked me, because my grandma's like one of the most spiritual people ever, like just like in tune with God, but like very, very like Christian in the sense where like no drugs or anything, but like still so kind more than anything. Not like those like authoritarian types, but just like accepting. And she's like, "Do you think your grandma would accept it?" I'm like, well, I think grandma would have accepted it if she understood that there was like massive psychological operation campaigns done by the US government to make these like substances appear to be like these evil forces, when like realistically they just saw a threat to their own, and that scared them, and what they wanted to do is hide this. And like when I said that, like I said it with so much passion, she was like, she didn't really know how to respond. I was like, and I think that's all we can really do is that like you can only, and this is what I get a lot of this from Jordan Peterson, like you have to tell your truth. Without truth, we live in chaos, and like your truth has meaning. Every single one of ours, both of you guys, every single person listening to this podcast, like your truth is powerful. And the more you say that, the more I think you can get in tune with this force in the universe, where you can call it God, whatever it is to you, that's all that really matters. Truth is the only way to get to there. I mean, truth and love, really. And I think the more that we can live our truth, the more we can just really open ourselves up to the amazing things that God has planned for us. And later that night, after the whole experience of going to M's and everything, I'm on the phone with my buddy Adam Clay Steber, and I'm reading this random message board online, and all of a sudden he starts like he's saying these words, and they're coming on. If you ever read that, it's like as above, so below kind of stuff. And those words are on the page. And like this happened like 3 or 4 times. Like I'd be scrolling, he'd say it, and it just appear. And I was like, what the fuck? Like this is weird, man. And like those pages were like from this dude on the biz board on 4chan. He calls himself 42. It's kind of like, I don't know, what you consider like a virtual Moses for people who worship. Like for those who are aware of the cult of Kek, they worship basically like this chaos god that's a frog. And he thinks of himself as kind of like Moses of that, where he's trying to like illuminate them, like, you know, don't worship other gods before me, is kind of his angle more than anything. And he has ideas like you get 42 pill, kind of like taking the red pill, but different, really, not like a Matrix red pill kind of thing. And I just dove down that rabbit hole, and it opened up so many different just like weird coincidences in my life where I'm like in pretty decent contact with this guy. And just kind of like, I don't know, I'd tell him, like, and show him kind of some of the symbols associated with what I was doing, and be like, I just saw those like a week ago. And then he'd say something, and like one of his prayers that he sends out all the time is the prayer of Saint Michael the Archangel. And that was one of the I'd said over my buddy M and myself when I was on that mushroom trip. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, you know, like coincidence, you know, what a quinky dink, you know. And I've become like moderately close with this dude, like just like in terms of just like our levels of like, not, I don't want to say level, because I think that's probably the wrong way to put it. Our passion for spirituality more than anything, and just had these like just endless synchronicities, man, to a point where it's finally calming down a little bit, and I feel like I kind of take a breath. It's nice to just, as Adam referred to it, see a little chaos instead of just see meaning everywhere. You know, this would be a little overwhelming at times, but I'm grateful for it nonetheless. And I felt like I've just finally integrated a lot of this experience. And talking to you, Ruben, it was very like, that was my first time like talking about someone I don't know, so I was kind of just trying to piece it all together. And last night I've done this a couple times, a ritual burning ceremony where I take like an old article of clothing, something I think represents an older version of me, and I burn it. And I kind of think about like different parts of myself that are dying. I think it's kind of like either you can burn your deadwood or it'll burn you. And like we have a lot of deadwood on us, you know, we're all have these old parts of us that don't really need to be there anymore, and I think are hindering us from who we could be. You know, I think we're all just divine potential, really. And I like doing that. I feel like it's kind of a way to speed up the process a little bit and just kind of get in tune. So I was burning some stuff. I took one of the cigarettes that I took for an offering that was sitting on my altar for the longest time since that experience, and burned that too. I recently wrote down, so I'm a firm believer now that your desires create your beliefs, which create your thoughts, which create your actions, which literally create everything else around you. And like, that's a really big premise in Buddhism. The best way to do it is they think like meditation is the highest form of thought. To think realistically, you're just getting into the flow of everything, really, more than anything. You're opening yourself up to the flow. And that's something I've just seen happen in my life so much recently that I wrote down all my desires and my beliefs, and I'm like speaking these as like the flames are like burning this old blanket that represents a super old part of myself, literally like 4 years. Well, not even my blanket technically. I don't know how I got it, but I got it. and it just really wasn't me anymore. And my buddy M, he left a tapestry at my place after he had recently moved out of his place and back home with his parents. Um, and that tapestry he bought that day of that experience. So I asked him, like, do you trust me? He said, yeah. And I kind of guided him through that experience virtually a little bit, which was another kind of like creativity thing where I just kind of felt like I was on the flow with it and just rode with it more than anything. I said, basically kind of told him to do the same thing that I was doing, but like kind of add your own little mix to it and like pray and visualize and just kind of like see the old part of you disintegrating, dying, whatever, and like watching the fertile ground, like the phoenix and the flames, watching the fertile ground be created and watch the new you arise. You know, the birth, redemption, whatever you want to call it. And we did that. And we were talking on the phone last night, and I just felt at peace. And I felt like I finally kind of capped off the experience a little bit. And it's kind of just crazy that I happened to be talking to you guys the next day. I didn't plan on that at all. And it just kind of just works. Like, it's amazing how the Lord works, how the universe works, how the spirit works when you get into alignment with it, you know. So I really think it wants the best for us. We just need to open ourselves up to that. So that would be, I guess, the conglomeration of that entire thing. So I apologize for making you guys have to listen for that long, but that's I'm just trying to best put it all together so I can try and get the spirit of it more than anything, and trying to just share that with others, because that's the one thing I've realized, just the amazing things that God has done in my life, and just trying and share that light. You know, my cup overflows. Like, who else can I help, like, find that light in themselves? You know?
Yeah. No, dude, it's great. I mean, and uh, you know, even though you say you finally integrated it sounds like one of those experiences that we have where like you'll be integrating it for the next, you know, the rest of your life. You know, like there's always going to be something that comes and you're like, oh yeah, you know, and it's like you get so much information from that. Like you can't sum it up in a, you know, in a podcast episode. I mean, it's just uh life lessons. And I think you kind of mentioned it, but I mean, it is kind of like years and years of therapy of breaking stuff down and building it back up. Psychedelics let you do that, you know, in a night, you know,
Right.
and that's what you went through, you know, and it's great. I love the part of the aspect of your story that like you helped yourself by helping your friend too, you know, and helped him, you know, like your experience that you had was just as important to him as it was to you. And I mean, I mean, that's beautiful, man, you know. Like for me, you know, uh other than like videos and podcast episodes where I've talked about my experiences, they really were only me, you know, like I didn't utilize that moment other than maybe sometimes where I reached out to someone, but they weren't going through what your friend was going through. You know, afterwards, like felt like, eh, you know, yeah, I needed to reach out to other people and just connect. The fact that you really like, you know, helped your friend integrate his experience through your integration. I mean, that's beautiful, man. I love hearing that, you know?
I really appreciate that. Thank you. I think one book that I've been reading that I finished recently is called The Master Key System. And that's where a lot of my inspiration, that and Be Here Now, where the whole desire, beliefs, thought, action kind of thing comes from. And they talk about how, like, we're all, like, the whole world around us is this universal soul. And we're all a part of that. We're all like a little glimpse of that. And I think there's a similar idea in Christianity that we're all one body in Christ, and we're all part of this universal mind. We're all connected to this force. And I think if that's true, and we all are one body in Christ, we're all one body, we're all one mind. And realistically, I think the darkness that exists within us can just be, or and other people can just be a reflection of us too. And I think I'm a big believer in starting on like a local level, and like this is a lot of JP inspiration really, of if you want to change the world, like clean your room, you know, start with yourself. And I think change happens within. Be the change you want to see in the world, and like being able to. And I think that's where a lot of, and I felt, and like literally saw before I got that phone call, I was like visualizing the divine masculine spirit awakening. And I think that's what that is being able to have these passions about these spiritual ideas, whether they be psychedelic, whether they be religious, whatever it may be, whatever it is that is your truth, and not giving a fuck what people think. Like, we live in such a fragile society sometimes where people are offended by like what we believe. And I think that we shouldn't be offended by what we believe, that words inherently, most of the time, can't hurt you. And we should be teaching people to be strong and be able to stand up for the things that they believe in. And like, that's the only way we can grow as a society. That's the only way we can get this chaos that's been this bullshit 2020 for the past fucking 9 months. The only way we can get through that is by like starting locally, start like telling the truth, being honest, and like talking about the things that literally like light up your soul. And like, that's all I felt recently is like, I just kind of realized how all the amazing things God has done in my life. And I'm just like, I'm done hiding from that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we all have that ability inside of us to like really tap into that. I don't think I'm special. I'm not different from anybody. Like, we're all the same. We all have that potential inside of us. We really do.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally, you know, and going back to what we were talking about at the start about a psychedelic revolution, like that is the turning point when more people are thinking that way of like, you know, more people are growing themselves. That will make the whole grow better, you know, and that's the psychedelic tipping point is when everyone stops, you know, sitting on the sidelines of like personal growth and like actually being like, yeah, I gotta grow. I gotta help myself. Like that's how like society will grow stronger. It's not, and that's one thing I've realized, like, you know, with politics and stuff like that, the government is not going to save us here. And you know, I mean, like you kind of mentioned, you know, how there's like a psyops against like psychedelics basically by the government. Like, obviously the government is going to work against our best interest if you look at how they've, you know, treated these substances and our ability to have these experiences to get that knowledge. You know, it's all about the personal growth. But with in the background, knowing we're all part of one giant whole, you know. And yeah, I mean, there's obviously other paths to that, but psychedelics and especially using them, you know, what I really like about your story too, is the intention and ritual nature you had. You know, I think there's something to that. Like you mentioned, you know, you could go to, either Oklahoma or the jungle or wherever, you know, you could go to have this ritual, but having the intention is the most important part, and you can recreate that yourself. And I think your experience shows that, you know, that the respect you showed it, I think you got that back in the gravity and the importance of the experience.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's something I've just tried really hard with. Also, shouts. Someone told me recently that like half of Oklahoma was given a Native American population, so that's super dope. Which leads me on the next idea that I believe that if we want to heal as a country, we really need to heal with the roots of the people that we took it from. And also realize there's like there's forgiveness that needs to happen on both sides too. And like I think we need to start having those conversations. And I think like that's like the core of who we are as a country, you know. And I think once we can heal that and integrate that, we'll be able to come together a lot stronger and be able to, because I don't know, you kill a bunch of people on their land, their spirits are going to be pretty pissed, man. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's where a lot of this is coming from, you know?
Oh yeah.
So it's like just being able to tap into that healing power that exists and being able to trying to bring that into every single type of person around us and be able to try and forgive ourselves too is always one of the biggest things. But try and just connect those roots again, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, I got to plug in my computer. It's already plugged in. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
No.
Wonderful.
You know, there's another thing you touched on I wanted to comment on too, where I forget. I think you were talking to your mom about like kind of the religious component to the psychedelic trip, and again mentioning that the government, you know, kind of was holding it back. You know, I mean, if you look at these traditional usage of psychedelic plants like ayahuasca and stuff like that, you know, a lot of those ayahuasca ceremonies are rooted in Christianity and just other, you know, religion basically and spirituality. And it is funny how like the Western kind of stigma of, like you said, calling it drugs, takes that component out of it. You know, when you look at like real hardcore kind of teetotaling Christians or whatever. They would never think of having a psychedelic experience to become closer and to actually experience God or Christ or whatever. And like that is such a shame, because there's a longer tradition, just not in this country. There's a longer tradition in humanity of entheogens being used in a religious manner to get closer to God. And it's really just the past 100 200 years where America has taken over the stigma surrounding this stuff to make it be like, no, that's against God, if anything else. And it's like, that's just not right. And I kind of believe that it's, whether it's intentional or not, it's that the lawmakers, the policymakers, the government, they want it to become the religion, and that these spiritual mystical experiences that people can have on these substances get in the way of that. And I think that's something we saw that kind of squashed the 1960s psychedelic revolution, was that that it was the government wanted us to think that they were God, and they didn't want us putting a piece of paper on our tongue and feeling that we were actually experiencing God,
Realizing that God exists within us, if God really is all this, and this is just more of a logical point than anything, God is all this. We're technically a part of that. Like, we're seeing through it, like we are experiencing that, we're the universe experiencing itself. Are we not then a part of God? I believe that divine light, that divine spark exists within all of us. And I really like tapping into one of my favorite ideas, is that worshiping the state as God. And I think there's another Petersonian idea, give him credit where credit's due. And he talked about like how Nietzsche, I don't know if Nietzsche referred to it or it was Peterson, that when the death of God was announced, that created a big hole. And that hole was immediately filled by what is an institution, being the Catholic Church, which already existed at the time at that point. So I guess this is more or less them losing power. That hole is filled by the state. And I think the state is just people. And I don't believe in worshiping people. I don't believe in worshiping false idols. I believe there's only one God. And I believe that when you worship the state, you're essentially just worshiping. I think it just degrades in like materialism, to a point where like we are so worried about like the next thing and the next object. And the thing is, one thing I try and like tell my little sister too is that like happiness aren't found in things, it's what you do with them, is the people that you share those experiences with. Like, and that's the thing is like I think people are starting to wake up to that too. I think it's a little tough with the technology that we have, because a lot of these corporations, a lot of these algorithms are essentially harvesting our attention as fuel to pay for their ads. But I personally believe that blockchain is going to be a great technology that's going to assist us to create better incentivized systems that still engage and work with the power, that inherent power that capitalism and human nature has, but better leverages those drives and ambitions to be able to make a better world around us, really. And I hope that we no longer worship the state and that we can find something different. And shouts to the Native American Church, because that's where this inspiration, where the experience came from. And hopefully we can have more not institutions, but organizations like that open people up to receiving these experiences in a very safe and healthy and responsible way. I think that's a really big loophole in the state system that I think that can be leveraged a lot more than what is being now. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I think that's a silver lining in what we're going through with the pandemic and everything. And is that government looks so foolish now, whether it's the government that's in control now or the one or the faction that's trying to take control. Both sides look, at least in the American government, look foolish. And everybody's kind of like hiding away from a virus, but also the virus that's infected humanity of like hatred and jealousy and all the 7 deadly sins or whatever are just rampant in social media and mainstream media, like you said. Where not only are they trying to harvest our attention, they're trying to direct the flow of it and direct like the reality tunnel that we're in, and force us to feel scared and jealous and hateful and stuff like that. And I think the more you wake up to that, whether it's through psychedelics or whatever, the more that you wake up to that, the more you realize that that stuff exists, but there's just as much good and positive and love. And if you focus on that, you get this sense of independence that you don't need the state. We need each other, not in a worshiping people type of way, but like relying on people. We can rely on each other instead of being at odds with each other. And the state just tries to put us at odds so that the de facto like trust we have is in the state, and that's just not the case. And that's where there's a gray area where politics and religion often fall. And I think that's what scares people away from religion, is the politics of it. Like you mentioned, the Catholic Church, is definitely a very good example of that, I mean, I look at their structure, right? Like the spiritual leader gets voted into place, right? Like that's as political as it gets, right? But yeah, it's I think the silver lining, to get back to my thought there, the silver lining will be that people, the state will look so foolish when this all shakes out, that you'll have to be an idiot to really believe in them, and so many people are going to be left like, what do I believe in? And if it's from a spiritual nature, it's going to be decentralized spirituality, decentralized thought, which I think psychedelics and meditation and philosophy represent, the personal journey to the truth, not just being told what the truth is. And blockchain will be the decentral, we will flock to what can we trust? We can trust decentralized value storage and exchange. And I think that's what blockchain represents. And that's a big synergy I see between the psychedelic mind and the cryptocurrency mind, and I think that's why you see oftentimes so many people find one through the other. I know so many people. I'm one that, like, I had a vision on a mushroom trip where I snapped out of it, and like the word that came to my mind was Bitcoin. And so there's a lot of people like that. And then there's a lot of people that, they found cryptocurrency because they wanted to use it to buy psychedelics. There's a lot of people that had it that way. I mean, there's a straight up synergy that way. But I think it all represents decentralized trust and belief, and the independent nature of the self. I think they both kind of represent that.
I hear you. I really like the idea, and it's funny you say trust. I mean, obviously, I'm from Minnesota, so watching a officer kneel on someone's neck for however long it was like 4 minutes or something like that, and killing. I mean, some people argue he's like, oh, he's on drugs, that's why he died. And he's like, no, he died because he had a fucking knee on his neck of a officer who's abusing their power. So we can't trust the police. We can't trust the Fed because they've printed out 20% of the current of our debt that already exists, which means our dollar is going to go to shit. Like, it's inevitable inflation. We can't trust our politics. Most people don't like believe the outcome of the results of the election. No one's probably going to believe it this time. And it's like blockchain is so much better at that. Like, how I don't. And like the people, like, I understand why people are upset about it, but like the whole mail-in voting thing, like, you really think mail-in voting? I think it just shows like how I don't want to say out of touch, because I don't mean it in like a degrading way, but like how unaware people are of like the potential technologies that do exist. And I think that creates an incredible hole for like entrepreneurs to really step in. And like, if you really look at a lot of the governance tokens in the blockchain space and a lot of DeFi tokens, those are, like you said, it's decentralized trust. It's a far better way of like operating a system. It's a far better way of being able to just be able to communicate, trade, transfer messages. And honestly, I think blockchain won't be complete until we have centralized, because I think you always need, like, if you think of like an office, like remote workers are great and remote workers really work really well, but you need some sort of like organization, and I think we're going to start seeing almost organizations evolve out of these blockchains, kind of like caterpillar, butterfly, whoosh. or cocoon, butterfly, whoosh. And we're going to just naturally gravitate to them as new forms of government. And they just provide so much more power for people in terms of their dollar, be able to better have a store of value. Just so much more tools with DeFi in general. Like that was the few things that have been untouched by the digital revolution are the government basically and banking. And now this is the opportunity of two of the most powerful holding institutions in the world to see their time come to an end. And either they can ride the wave or be crushed by it because it's inevitable. And this is the power of the people speaking at this point. And there's nothing that can stop this at this point. Yeah, it's definitely, as you can tell, something I'm very passionate about. So it's something that's just very, I believe that's the future, and I believe that's the best future that we can get, and that can provide equality for all, really, or at least the best that we possibly can.
Yeah, no, I agree that it has the power to, and it's hard to shake out like the market greed that surrounds cryptocurrency.
2017. Oh my gosh.
Right. Or just right now, there's plenty of just like trader nonsense that goes on with cryptocurrency. And it's hard for people from the outside looking in to look past that. It's hard to look past the dollar signs. But there is such an opportunity to empower the people that are kept down by the banking system and the government. Look at I follow a Twitter account that is like some sort of bot that has like, it says like the stimulus check in Bitcoin now is worth this, and it's almost double. If you would have bought Bitcoin with your $1,200, you'd have twice as much. Most people, if you needed it, it barely covered what you needed it for. And if you didn't need it, you bought a new, sauna or something. I don't know. It's like, it was just like kind of such a stupid, half-assed gesture by the government of like, here's a month's worth of salary. If you worked minimum wage, 40 hours a week, that should last you 6 months, and it's just stupid. But looking at like that, if you would have bought Bitcoin with that, take the market nonsense out of it. Just look at the inflation, because the dollar value of that $1,200 till now in Bitcoin, that represents to me more that the value of the dollar has been cut in half since they issued those checks. And yeah, okay, tomorrow Bitcoin could crash down to $7,000 or whatever. There is market fuckery, and that's whatever. But if you zoom out at a Bitcoin chart, there is an inherent value that increases over time. And that's what that bot reminds me, is that this free money that the government threw out just to, keep people from coming in with pitchforks and taking over what's it called, a coup or whatever of the government. They did the minimal possible to stop that from happening. It could have lifted up so many people that you can't, when you look at the inflation versus deflation, you can't save your way out of poverty anymore. That's impossible. And there has to be another way out, and you can't start a 401k your way out of poverty. You can't buy Amazon stock out of poverty. Like crypto, it's whether it's altcoins or Bitcoin or whatever, it's a emerging asset class that you can get on the ground floor of a deflationary system, and you can save your way out of poverty. And you just have to take that leap of faith and have that trust and just learn and grow. And it totally represents that, but it's hard to see past the greed and nonsense. So, but at its core, that's what I see crypto as far as what it can do for society,
Right. And hopefully, I don't know, I was like, oh, well, maybe you need government regulation, but government's inherently kind of like the opposite of crypto. Like they don't really work. But hopefully, like we can create, like once we start developing big networks, I'm a big fan of the DeFi space. Personally, I believe Chainlink is going to be like one of the biggest cryptos ever. So I highly advise, and then just in general, always do your own research. That's the biggest thing. But also, like you said, there's a leap of faith. You're jumping from one system to another. But I think the DeFi is really cool because it's giving platforms for people to stay on blockchain this time. Because like last time, obviously, like Pete Bull, and that was fucking crazy. Look at the Justin Sun from Tron, and like he would announce an announcement for an announcement, and like their coin would pump like 80%, and like shit. I personally believe it's fucking vaporware, but at the same time, they made billions of dollars, and it's like you're talking about, it turns a lot of people off. But in terms of my main point, there's these governance platforms that I hope maybe we can, like, as we start using different networks or the same networks more frequently, we can start coming up with some established rules on them and being like, okay, this is how we want to do it. Because 2017 reminded me of the Wild West. Like that was I got in pretty late. I want to say it was like August or September is when I started researching in August, and I just said, fuck it, emptied and drained my 401k and put it all in Bitcoin. I was like, fuck it, like, here we go. And watched my money go like 5 times, like within like a month and a half, and then watched it just like deteriorate to like half that amount, like 2 months later. And it was at the same time, I learned so much, and I like the memes in the community are so great. And like at the same time, like some of like the most interesting conversations I have with people, or like some of the most interesting tweets I read, are from people that are in the blockchain space. Like like you said, that there's that combine of decentralized thinking and or not even specifically religion, spiritual thought, and blockchain, where you have these people that are very open-minded, who have opened themselves up to a lot of experience, who have a lot of knowledge. And that's one thing I believe, that's everyone knows something that you don't. And I think that belief helps me be able to be probably a lot less of an asshole than I used to be. But at the same time, it's like there's these people who are incredibly smart in this space. And like really, once you start diving, you really start understanding the philosophical foundations of it, especially once you understand the potential of the technology. I think you just naturally gravitate. And like you said, that was such a half-assed gesture from the government. Like literally, like you're watching Canada get like, what was it, $3,000 a month for like 3 months, which I don't agree with, because I think printing money like that is very irresponsible, and you're going to see the inevitable like downturn of said money. But at least they did something. And like literally, like we live in such a bipartisan fucking system that they literally can't even agree on the guidelines of the next check. And it's like I just, like you said, the government can't save you. And like that's one thing that always flows through my mind, is like, don't rely on that stimulus check, because these are a bunch of fucking like people who literally are more concerned about staying in office and maintaining some sort of power most of the time than actually working for the people. The thing is, the system can only produce the system. So like you can have good intentions going in, but I think no matter what, you'll come out just as the system wants to create you. And I think it's time to move on to a better system. And I think it's a much brighter future for all of us for it there too.
Yeah.
I really like a lot of your ideas on blockchain. So you definitely tapped into something very passionate about.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I think like what you mentioned about crypto people, you know, having some of the smartest thoughts and being some of the smartest people. You know, I think that's another synergy with psychedelics. You know, it's like and especially in, like you said, a bipartisan like kind of environment that the world can be. It's like you're either right wing or left wing, and social media tries to like be like, you know, analyze, like, is this a right wing person, this is a left wing person, and the people that can't figure out, you know, that cause the most turmoil from both sides when you get into the comments of tweets or Facebook posts or whatever. If you follow that person's like thinking, they're usually into either psychedelics or blockchain or both, you know, like the people that kind of ruffle the most feathers. You know, I think that's definitely kind of an area where we all kind of meet. And again, I think there's something more to play on a deep spiritual level with, you know, both of those camps, you know, they're connected spiritually more than we think, you know.
Are you aware of the idea of the Akashic records in Hinduism? I think it's Hinduism. Sorry if I'm wrong, but I think it's Hinduism. You ever heard of that concept?
I mean, I've heard it pronounced Akashic, but yeah.
Yeah. Screw my white Wisconsin understanding of this idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
or at least the linguistics more than anything. So the idea of it, for those who aren't familiar, is basically, and correct me if I'm wrong too, because I could miss it definitely. It's basically just like a written history of everything. It's like a divine book, and I think it's referred to as the Book of the Lamb and the Book of Revelation in the Bible. And I think essentially with blockchain, like all the blocks are recorded, all the blocks are there. The truth stands as it is, and the system is wired so well that most of the time, like 99% of the time, all it is going to be is truth. And I think that's almost like a physical manifestation of that idea. So it's like the idea of these like religious spiritual ideas, and it's like they're manifesting themselves on the blockchain. Like it's wild. Like, and that's what happens. You get that synergy of these really smart people who can build some really cool shit, and they're also inspired by these spiritual ideas. So, hopefully blockchain is the tipping point.
Yeah. There's along with the kind of idea of the Akashic records, another really interesting book that I've read that kind of talks about kind of a comparison of what that could be, of what that's referencing, and what we experience as the Akashic records is the Cosmic Serpent. The book is called the Cosmic Serpent, and it's all about DNA. Ooh. And so there's a large portion of our DNA, and I forgot the percentage, but I mean it's more than half, I think. I can't remember, but they call it junk DNA because they haven't been able to figure out what it codes for, what it does, and they just say it's just leftover stuff from evolution, right? But so what this one of the studies this book references was a linguist, I think he was. I can't remember what his actual field of study was, but his name is Ziff, like ZIPF. And there's a law that he came up with, Ziff's law, that any document that has been written by humans, if you break it down to the smallest letter words and the amount of times they appear in that document, and then list all of the words that are in the document, like descending or ascending from the length of number or letters that are in them, that the correlation to how many times they appear in the document is a certain ratio. And across every document that humans have ever written, that ratio is consistent. If you diagram out the words and the consistency of the words in the document, the same is true if you take human junk DNA and take all of the phrases, the combinations of the four amino acids or whatever the fuck it is that's in DNA, the Gattaca, whatever that is. Every combination of DNA in our junk DNA follows the same ratio in its how many times it appears and the size of it or whatever. It follows the same ratio as every other document ever written by humans. Essentially, like saying like our junk DNA is the Akashic records is what they, are kind of suggesting in this book, that all the messages and stuff that we think are, like these things from, we're getting from outside ourselves. Those messages are actually inside ourselves, and they're encoded in our DNA, and that's what we're like experiencing. That's what they get at in the book, and I think that's a fucking mind-blowing idea.
Yeah, that's quite the trip, dude. That just makes me think of the idea of like, thoughts, beliefs, desires, reality, and like how, like, if we're a part of the universe, we're essentially made up of the same thing, which means we kind of operate off the same principles. But the only thing is we don't really have anything else to compare consciousness to other than ourselves. And I like to think that we think of consciousness kind of the same way that we did about the universe, and thinking that the earth was at the center of it in terms of humans and consciousness. I like to think that there are other conscious entities out there. We don't really understand how deep it really goes. And once we come in contact with those, it's going to completely shift the way that we view the world. So most likely just based off, I think, random chance, their idea of consciousness formed differently than ours, most likely, because it's just an environmental. And I think once we realize we can get out of our own head and realize that there's more to life out there than just us, and just kind of really understand that bigger divine picture, it just makes you feel small, which some people really don't like at first, but I think it helps you. It keeps you humble, keeps you in check, and just makes you understand. And I don't mean like your place of being sane in some place, but really understanding like what you're supposed to do in this world, Once you realize like how really important and like really special life is, I think it really inspires you to want to just use it the best you possibly can, And one thing that I strive to do is whenever I'm kind of like lost a little bit, I'll try and like visualize myself sitting on my deathbed and like, okay, well, like, what do I want to see when I die? Like what what would put a smile on my face to as I'm when I'm dying, that would be good. I'd be at peace with that. And like I try and like live that every day. I'm human, so I'm imperfect, as we all are. But at the same time, I think it just helps keep things in perspective, realizing how small we really are and just how much more to life there is than just us, you know. And once we realize that, I think we're due for just really incredible things, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, kind of on that kind of thought, like what do you think about with how crazy 2020 is and everything? What do you think about like the government saying like, oh yeah, we've recovered ships that aren't from this earth. Anyway, here's the Fed minutes. You know, like how do you feel about like how like it's so crazy right now that a government acknowledgement of basically aliens, or at least proof of aliens, like doesn't even matter. Nobody even cares. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I also returning to one of the previous things you said, the idea of like the virus, like we're seeing a virus of like ourselves, kind of. And one thing I've always been saying since the beginning is virus is just a reflection of ourselves. It's a reflection of our thinking, what we've allowed, and just we've let it happen. Same time, I think people are leveraging that to see what they want politically. And this kind of ties in that certain point where I wouldn't be surprised. At this point, nothing really surprises me anymore. Where it's kind of like, you know, you kind of become numb to the change a little bit. You're like, all right, fuck it. Like, all right, oh, aliens, all right, oh, flaming tornadoes, all right, whatever. Like, it's at that point, I was like, I'm just trying to like get my spiritual life right because I don't know what the fuck's happening, and I don't know. I believe in preparing the ark before the flood, kind of thing. Let's put it that way. But I think that the government, I think that it's probably real. And I think the government's known about it for a long time, but they don't really know that much. But at this point, I think they're trying to distract us as much as we possibly can of like what's going on. I think they're trying to distract us from the global pedophile ring that's like massively being unveiled around the globe, but also other things too, and just like how they're handling things in Congress and how poorly they have like handled this entire process, you know, and how these institutions have really failed us in terms of, but at the same time, like we've never experienced anything like this. So it's kind of like, I think it more or less just like showed the flaws in our system and the cracks. And like, I think the best we can do is just acknowledge those, accept those, and then really move forward the game plan. I think it's not even just like a systematic level. Like we can see it in ourselves, you know, like the organizations that I'm a part of, like we're going to be going through massive change. And I think everyone's really going to be going through massive change, but like, out of chaos I believe out of chaos comes order. And I believe that this is like an incredible opportunity to really rebuild the world. Like, and that's what's so cool about like like people that are in the psychedelic realm and like the blockchain space is like you have these people who are very open-minded and very excited and very passionate, but they also have a lot of technical know-how too. And I think those are the type of people that really can do a lot in these times, you know. And it's like that's why I think I was really trying to start this quarantine. Like I started doing like cold showers at the beginning of the shit and like just trying to like keep myself above the mess. Just anything to like keep myself going more than anything because it was fucking depressing, dude. Like literally just sitting in my house and like both my roommates are gone. So it's like I like came back from Colorado after a spring break trip, just smoked Halloween for like 3 weeks, literally doing nothing. I'm like, do something. But like the cold showers helped a lot. And like, I don't know, man. I think once we just really just can tap into and like just like create, you know, and really just ride that intuition and follow that inner voice that says you can do certain things. Like I think we're really going to start seeing huge changes in the world, and I think like that we're in the right time for that right now. So like anyone that has a fucking idea of like something you want to do, fuck what anybody thinks and just fucking do it. Like what do you got to lose at this point, you know? Like you're either you can like make your dreams come true or you can watch someone else do them. So yeah, no, it's fucking a little off topic, but I think it's just the government distracting us to answer your main question.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What do you think?
Well, I think so. I think personally that what we have perceived as aliens, perceived as angels, perceived as ghosts, perceived as gods, you know, whatever we have perceived as supernatural entities, whether that's on a DMT trip, anything. I think that life is not confined to 3 dimensions. And I think we are we are a third dimensional physical body, but we're not a third dimensional consciousness. However, our senses, the five senses that, you know, that we generally are create our general reality, those aren't the only senses we have. And I think that psychedelics have helped us use our other senses to be aware of these things, and we call them entities. Deep spiritual awakening through religion, through meditation, through yoga, through stuff like that, heightens our other senses, and we are aware of these other, you know, the other life in other dimensions. And so when we use these terms of everything, that's just the terminology that our 3D brain is trying to explain what we've experienced, witnessed, felt, communicated with, whatever. So I think that what people would call aliens are always around, and they always have been. But we're going through such our belief is being shaken so much in what is real, what is normal, right? The new normal, as everyone says, the new normal is like some level of spiritual awakening, whether that's to the level of the psychonaut or the blockchain enthusiast or the yogi. It doesn't matter. Everybody's gotten bumped up a notch, you know. I don't know how much you follow of like ascension. I think we talked about that, but you know, I think that that's what that kind of thing is getting at, is that we're all getting pushed up a notch in our awareness, whether we like it or not. And so I think the government viewpoint of it is distracting, but I think we're going to be more aware of all the life that is around us in all the dimensions, more and more going forward, and that's just going to snowball effect, to the point that perhaps, especially when you think of how good our information exchange is now, there will be a way to have contact with aliens or whatever, and I do think that will possibly be the tipping point there of like, we need to stop fighting over, you know, Republicans and Democrats or racists and, you know, woke people, whatever fights are going on. Like, they will seem just kind of minuscule when we actually realize, like, we're not alone in this universe. We're not alone in this space, because there's other dimensions around us that have a say in how life is going on. And I think that's kind of what's happening. But I also, I don't know, you know, like I'm along for the ride, enjoying it either way. But yeah, I think I love watching alien shows, ancient alien shows. I mean, I definitely don't believe we are alone in the universe, but I think the universe is weirder and shaped differently, and the distances and size and color and what's in between, all that stuff, I don't think we really understand that. And yeah, and as far as like you said about like the virus causing all of this, I think, you know, I look at my background, my degree is in evolutionary biology, and
fascinating, dude. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so like I look at the whole pandemic completely different. Humans would, a lot of what we consider to be human on a physical level, society level, everything, we owe to viruses. We owe to pandemics like this. This has happened before. You know, when they say, oh, the common cold is a coronavirus. Well, when it first came into the human population, it killed the same percentage of people that it's killing now, probably even more, because we didn't know what was going on. There wasn't as much medical intervention. And, you know, everyone's kind of thinking we can wait inside until there's a vaccine. And, you know, I just don't think that's going to happen. I know they call it herd immunity and stuff like that. I think that is just what ends up happening in this situation, is we evolve with this virus. Now, you can look at that as a negative thing if you look at the deaths, but the path of evolution is paved with death, and it sucks. You feel for the people that die. You don't want to be the people that die. You don't want the people that die to be one of your friends or loved ones. But that is the sad thing about evolution, is that people die as we evolve. And I think, to tie that into my alien thought, is like, we call a computer virus that can do malicious things to your computer, but there's viruses that can kind of do things that just change it or go unnoticed or whatever. I think there's viruses that can be kind of created and incorporated into a system like humankind, like the ecology of this planet, that it's possible that aliens that are older and understand life more than we do, that they could be like, hey, there's some fucked up shit going on here. They're not going on the right path, kind of update that system. And we would call that a virus, but that could be what we're actually seeing. If I don't know how much about simulation theory, but like if our genetic code is like computer code and it's altered by a virus, like that sounds exactly like how we develop computer programs to do what we want to do. And I think that's like something that could be going on here too, possibly. I mean, that's really woo woo. I'm not saying I fully believe in that. I'm just throwing theories out there. So like I kind of look at all of what's going on the virus level with a evolutionary tilt. I can look at Bitcoin that same way. Like if we've got this crazy system going on, isn't it possible that a virus could get added to it and it looks like what Bitcoin is? It looks like a network that's just dropped into the system without knowing who did it or anything like that. Like I was listening, I don't know if you know Max Kaiser, he's a Bitcoin YouTube guy and podcaster. And like he was getting really woo-woo on his first podcast episode that just came out, where he was saying that he thinks Satoshi is an alien and that Bitcoin is AI. And what did he say? He said, I don't know what's specific about this block, but he said that one of the blocks, he thinks that it became self-aware and that all of the stuff that we're like experiencing in the financial world is all part of this Bitcoin virus that an alien like inserted into the system.
Dude, you said like 18 different things that I want to comment on that just kind of like you're speaking my language right now, honestly. I'm just trying to like take that all in right now. It makes me think of the idea that like you open up to these entities when you take these experiences. So like the one thing that was really powerful about my attention, that I don't know where the hell I read it, but it was like what was it? Once you set your attention, the medicine starts kicking in. I think that these are like, there are different entities out there, man. Like, especially taking these, like, and there's different entities. I think each experience, each substance provides a different consciousness transit to like access these different entities, if that makes any sense. Like, I think a lot of people who smoke DMT would really connect with that. And like, I'm like a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, that like these things won't just be here just for us to get high. Like I think there's more rhyme to the reason, like in terms of like you're talking about the divine, like the idea of like the divine proportion before, in terms of like DNA, and like I believe that's that time. And there's a certain like, these entities will basically, like, I think they try and communicate with us, like you said, 'cause it's like a software update, and that software update may appear as what's it called, a virus. I'm like a big student of like Taoism, so like there's darkness and light, there's light and darkness, and just because something may appear as something that's like chaotic and destructive doesn't mean it always is bringing, like, maybe it's just bringing what we need, and like I think we kind of need to go through, I don't want to say cleansing because that's a little intense, but a reevaluation as a society and what we deem as important. Like you said, I really like the idea you talked about in terms of putting down our individual differences and realizing that we are all part of the human family, and that we all are part of something much larger than us. And like, I think I like the idea of it being a tipping point, takes being able to understand that there's something else out there. So that was really just, I don't know, I really liked how those ideas all connected more than anything. And just, I don't know, it's just fascinating. I think they're trying to communicate with us all the time, and it's just being able to open yourself up to it. And if you can open yourself up to it and really like ask to use the force for good more than anything, like some Luke Skywalker stuff, avoid the Darth Vader path. Just be able to, I think it will reward you for that. I think there's a reason to all this. And I think there's certain institutions, like the school I go to wants to tell me that, like, and it's like, it's the idea with like postmodernism, which I understand in terms of like, I don't know, a lot of it, my understanding comes from like JP, but I took a class on it that talked about like, and it just makes everything so like meta almost, where like I don't know, if you go deep enough and like you move enough like goalposts around, I feel like you can like really extract, like remove the meaning from anything. And I think that can only lead you to like a nihilistic path, and like that just leads to like inner darkness, I think. And I think that I believe that there is a meaning to everything. It's just we have to be able to ascribe that meaning. That's the potential power that we have as humans. That's the God-given ability. That's the ability that God has given us, is to be able to ascribe meaning. That's something that animals can't do, and it's a very powerful ability because it contains a lot of responsibility. But like, I think if you set your intention right and you ask these higher powers, I can only advise reaching out to God, because at least that's my guy. He will reward you. He rewards that which is good in this life and in life's after as well.
Mhm.
You just got, I don't know, you said so many things. It was so hard to connect.
Yeah.
Fascinating ideas, nonetheless.
I do that a lot. Yeah, well, I think that's the overall thing that guides most of my theories and thoughts. It is, like you said, that there's meaning to it. I can have a conversation or listen to a talk from pretty much anybody that follows any school of thought, and really, kind of help shape my thought and agree with and get a new perspective. But like the one group of people that like I just kind of like I don't shut off to, like I take what they have to say, but I don't think they get it, at all, like kind of thing. Is like the atheist kind of a crowd. Like one person that comes to mind is Richard Dawkins, right? Is that his name? Yeah. There's like a lot that I like that he says, but I don't know if you ever listen to him talk about psychedelics, but like he shits all over it and totally takes the like it's a drug in your brain, changes your perception, blah blah blah. And then like when whoever he's talking to is like, have you done them? He's like, well, no. And then it's like, well, then shut the fuck up. Like, I don't care.
Right.
I don't care. I don't care how many books you've read. Like, if you haven't done this and you want to like prescribe to like, I don't need to do them to know what it's all about. And what I know that it's all about is it's all about nothing and it's all chaos and there's no meaning to anything. Then it's like, I don't know. We're at an impasse there as far as like information I'm going to get from that person. And that's how I kind of feel. Like I have one friend who's a hardcore atheist and does mushrooms, grows mushrooms, but I don't think he's taken them with the intention and the understanding and the openness to really get that like, there is meaning to everything, no matter what that is. If it's multi-dimensional time travel, or, virus replication ability, whatever the nonsense I've spouted in the past hour, it doesn't matter. There's a meaning to it. That's the point. I don't know what the meaning is, but there is a meaning to it. And it's like that atheistic chaos type crowd. That's like, almost like they, like we said, you can believe politics as religion. There's people that can believe science as religion. And me as a person with a science degree that works, in the science field, I still like, it's not my religion, and that's where like, I think that, I guess to sum that up, what I'm saying is that I think like psychedelics are the marriage of like scientific thinking and spiritual belief, and that results in like there's meaning to all this. There's meaning in evolution means something, mystical experiences mean something, alien abductions mean something. All of this means something. There's a grand meaning to everything, and I think psychedelics and blockchain and cryptocurrency for that, because like I didn't think there was any meaning to the global economy until like you rode the bear market all the way through and was like, I just got played. What the fuck game was I playing? And then figured it out.
Yeah, no, it was quite the experience, man. Like it was well worth it, because like I don't know, kind of hard. It like just numbs you a little bit to like the current movements of the market. and like just being able to like realize that like crypto is pretty dynamic, and I think it better reflects who we are as people. Honestly, I don't think markets are meant to be very super stable. I don't think we're meant to like make money that easy off of them and just let it be more of a natural process. But as in reference to you were talking about how Dawkins had never done it, just like the man on your shirt had said, experience is the best teacher. And being able to like open yourselves up to these experiences. I don't know if you're familiar with Timothy Leary's 8th Circuit model of consciousness.
I've probably heard him talk about it, but no, if you want to explain it.
So it's basically the idea that different experiences, and these experiences can manifest themselves as substances or literal experiences, some of them being like sex or having like an extremely loving experience or even like extremely like primal experience almost will basically open up different. I don't know exactly how he refers to it because I've only read like the Wikipedia page like 20 times, but like basically opens up different, I guess what you call circuits of consciousness, different realms of perception, I guess you could put, and how that like different drugs like LSD can open up a couple of them. DMT opens up one, MDMA opens up one. And like, I think that's the thing is like, we're just like, we're basically these tools and these substances allow you to realize who you actually are. And like the abilities that we have as humans, and like awakens you to the divine potential that exists within you. And I think the more that like you seek that, like seek and ye shall find, the more you seek and you dive deep, the more you're rewarded, And sometimes that diving deep can be very frightening. It can be very scary. And I've been at times where you like literally are in primal fucking fear, like whether it's on a psychedelic trip or maybe a few days after, like that one where I said I was eating crows, like I was fucked up for months, man. Like that was fucking scary. But I think about that as like one of the most powerful experiences, realizing I was clinging to an old version of myself. And once I opened myself up to the new person and realized who I could be, that's when things started like started manifesting themselves. That's when things started working. That's when you start getting into the harmony of the force around you. Like things just happen. And like, I don't know. I don't believe in luck, but I think I'm lucky. I believe I'm lucky just in the sense, and it's just from being open to that, and just like really like just seeking for certain things, and like hopefully you have a good intention. Hopefully you're getting some sort of like you have some sort of divine laws, whether it be spirituality or God that you're working.
Well,
Oh, you froze there for a minute. It's all good.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, so we're at like an hour and a half. Did you have any more bullet points you wanted to talk about? I know.
I mean,
we've kind of talked about everything.
Yeah, I mean, nothing specifically. I mean, honestly, it was a very enlightening conversation. It was super good. Honestly, I was really enjoyed. This is kind of the stuff I talk about all the time, so it's cool to be around people who are open up to those ideas too, and especially to be able to have this platform that you guys have. Like, that's fucking sweet, man. Like, good for you guys. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what we like doing, man. I don't really reach out to guests and stuff. So it's like when someone reaches out and is like, hey, I want to talk about this or whatever, like I just kind of take that as, okay, that's who the next guest's supposed to be, and it works out. And so it was great. It's great talking to you. I definitely, imagine we'll have you back on at some point too, man. So just whenever you feel like coming on, you're more than welcome.
I'm excited to hear more of the work that you guys have done, honestly, just based off of like your thoughts. I haven't really had a chance to kind of check in too much, which I feel a little bad for. I should have done that just to kind of understand you guys a little more. But now you got me excited, honestly. I need some different stuff to listen to. My YouTube playlists have been a little dry recently, so I'm looking forward to diving on into it.
As always, thank you for listening to the Help Find the Others podcast. Please don't forget to check out our Discord server to connect with our growing community. The link to join can be found in the description. And if you feel like donating to our channel to help us grow, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description, as well as some cryptocurrency wallet addresses. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or have any questions about these topics, please email helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. If you would like to leave a voicemail or a text message question for a future episode, Stan, what's that number again?
567-233-1335.
Okay, guys, thanks again. And until next time, let's help find the others.